Now that we're successfully reading a spec file and printing out a nice report, the next goal is going to be executing multiple spec files. I'd like to be able to do something like this, passing in a list of spec files and have it execute all of them. At the moment, this is not going to work. It's going to execute the first file and that's it. I created another file for an example, another.js, and it looks like this. It's going to have a single describe block with two it blocks, both of which are going to fail. Another improvement I would like to make is not having to call run at the end of each spec. I would like to do this automatically and not require the user to have to do this. If you require the user to have to call run every single time, it's very easy to forget this, and then your test won't be executed, and that's going to be a big problem. So let's see if we can solve both of those problems. What we're going to do is, instead of passing in each file like this, I'm going to have an initial executable file, index.js, and that's going to handle gathering all of the spec files and executing them all. Of course, this is not working right now, so let's go ahead, make index.js and see if we can get this working. The first thing we're going to have to do is figure out which spec files we need to execute. We can do this by using process.argv. I'm just going to do a console log on this to show you how it looks. Let's head over to our terminal and run this one, and we're getting an array of arguments. The first one is always going to be your executable node.js, in this case mine is located here. The second one is going to be the initial file, in this case it's going to be index.js, and then we're just going to have a list of all the remaining arguments. So we're going to be able to grab these two and execute both of these specs. In this case, I'm only interested in the last arguments, so I'm going to say slice2, and this is going to give me an array of specs. So I'm just going to call that one const specs. Just to make sure this is working, I'm going to do a console log on my specs, and this should give me demo and another.js, and that is working correctly. The next thing we need to do is figure out how we're going to execute these. What we can do is do a for loop. I'm going to say for const spec of specs, and we can just go ahead and require these. I can say require path.resolve and pass in spec. This means we are going to grab the path module, so let's go ahead and require path from path. I'm just going to say const path is equal to require path. As we go ahead and require both of these, it's going to run all of the describe and it blocks, emit all of those events, and finally at the end, it's going to call run, and it's going to go ahead and execute all of these. In this case, it's going to run our test suite for us. Let's go ahead and give it a try and see what happens. We can see this is kind of working. We're running our very first spec, we're giving our summary, and then we're doing the same thing underneath. But this is not quite the desired behavior. What I would really like to do is print out all of my suites at the very top, and then we're going to summarize all of the failures at the bottom. So I'd like to move this block here down to the bottom. The reason this is happening is because we're calling run on a spec by spec basis. And what I really want to do is only call run once at the very end. So our new workflow is going to look something like this. We're going to loop over both of these spec files. We're going to go ahead and emit all of the events, so the describe and it blocks, and create that data structure. And then down here at the end, we're going to call run once. This does mean we need to require run inside of here, but we're no longer going to need to call run inside of our spec files. Let's go ahead and require run here first, just so we have access to it. And then I'm going to remove the run calls from both of my spec files, starting with demo.js. Just going to jump down here and delete run. We're going to do exactly the same thing in another as well. And this is looking a lot more similar to our traditional testing frameworks like Mocha and Jest. Now that we have both of those, let's go ahead and give it a try and see what happens. This is looking a whole lot better. We have all of our specs summarized up the top, and then we have a grouping of all our failures down the bottom, and this is much more what I expected. It is still a little bit difficult to read because we haven't got any white space up here, but the general idea is definitely there. Let's go ahead and quickly fix up the reporter to make it look a little bit better. I'm going to head back to runner.js, and what we're going to do is just do an extra console log after each of these reporter blocks. In this case, I only want to do it on a root level spec or root level suite, so I'm just going to say suite.test.depth, see if it's equal to 0, and if it is, we're just going to do an empty console log. The next thing I'm going to do is head back to my index.js file, and we're just going to delete this console log. We don't need that anymore. Let's give it another try. That is looking a whole lot better. We could probably add some more white space down here. I'm going to leave that one as an exercise. I'm also going to leave removing this white space up here as an exercise as well. That would be fairly easy to do with the use of some kind of flag to not do the console log on the very first spec, but to do it on all subsequent specs. We can see everything is now working correctly. Just to summarize what we're doing, We're going to require each of those files, and when you require them, it's going to automatically execute it. In this case, it's going to execute describe and it, and as we remember from before inside of our runners, if we head down to the describe function, it's going to emit all of those events, and that's going to create a single data structure in memory. Finally, after we've finished emitting all of those events, we're going to come down to the bottom and call run. That's going to loop over all of our suites using our recursive run suites function and execute everything. And then finally at the very end, we're going to get our nice summary. So everything is now working correctly. This does bring us to the end of the final video in this series. You may have noticed we haven't implemented describe only and it only, nor have we implemented before each and after each hooks. I decided to make these two videos exclusive to my GitHub sponsors as part of my GitHub sponsors program. I've set up this little platform here, anyone can access it, and if you're authenticated as a GitHub sponsor, you'll get access to a bunch of extra content. You'll not only get access to isolating with only and before each and after each, as well as the rest of the source code for this tutorial, you'll get access to all of my courses, all the past ones and all the ones that come out in the future as well. This currently includes complete Vue.js 3 and Vue.js the composition API, which I am currently re-recording. If you do find this content useful, please consider becoming a GitHub sponsor. This is going to make my open source activities in the Vue ecosystem, as well as my content creation, much more sustainable. I would much rather sell you interesting educational content instead of selling your attention to advertisers on YouTube. If you don't want to, that's completely fine as well. My content will continue to be freely available on YouTube, so you can go ahead and just consume it there. Anyway, that does bring us to the end of this series. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.